going to go ahead and start recording. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. My name is Bethany Farrell, and I am the Assistant Director of Career Development here at A&M Commerce. And we are so excited to have you and to have these great knowledgeable employers and researchers in the industry. So we have a lot of great information to cover, so I don't want to waste a second of time with y'all listening to me. And we're going to jump right in. So again, please make sure you keep your video hidden and your sound muted. Our first speaker today is Dr. Phil Gardner. Dr. Gardner is the director of the Collegiate Employment Research Institute at Michigan State. He's been with Michigan State for 28 years after receiving degrees in chemistry from Whitman College and a PhD in resource and development economics and public policy from Michigan State. His major areas of research include the transition from college to work, early socialization and career progression in the workplace, workforce readiness, and other areas related to college student studies. Michigan State's nationally recognized annual college labor market study is done under his direction each fall. We're so excited to have him join us today and discuss what he is seeing, what graduates can expect, and how to prepare for our current economic landscape. So Phil, I am going to turn off my video and mute myself and turn it over to you. You can go ahead, and I'm going to stop my share. You can go ahead and share your screen. I muted myself before I finished my phrase.
Let me find out. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to use it. I can't get up to my screen to get this onto. Oh, there it is. Let me do this. One more thing, and there you go. Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, Bethany, to spend some time with my colleagues in Texas. I usually come with data. I'm pretty well known as a data wonk. But I really don't, data is hard to come by right about now about what's just actually going on. We've been monitoring it closely since March, and we thought in May and early June we had some pretty good idea of what may emerge as a pattern that we might see in the fall. And I have to say that that's pretty well been mucked up by the resurgence of the virus, particularly in the South and the West. And it's really throwing things off. But I'm gonna frame this of what I've heard. I'm gonna admit that I've been on conversations with employers, not a significant number, in different parts of the country. I was just on one with yesterday in California. Some of you may well have a better handle what's going on right around you than I do, because you are in discussions with your employer base. But let me go and talk to you about what the emerging patterns we saw we've been working with. And we saw this start to emerge as how companies were beginning to react to the virus when schools shut down and recruiting had to quickly shift. But this is what we're seeing as a likely breakdown of where different organizations are right now and what they're thinking about recruiting. So there's a group that says they're not going to recruit at all. They just simply, for whatever reason, don't feel that they can conduct a recruiting this year, and they are just not. It's kind of like 2020-21 is just not going to happen. Believe it or not, there's more of those now than there were, a month ago. They tend to be small and mid-sized organizations. Not necessarily all of them are, but they tend to be smaller and mid-sized. That seems a lot of them that I've talked to lack a dedicated recruiting staff. So they don't have people that are dedicated recruiters. In small organizations, a lot of different people take those responsibilities on. And one of the things in the discussions with a couple of them, and it may not be universal, is that they just don't feel comfortable in a virtual setting, other than they're familiar with putting their job requests into Handshake or Simplicity or some other form, and then responding to those students that elect to send them materials. But they don't have, other than maybe some remote interviewing applications that they're familiar with, they're likely not to have applicant tracking systems. They're probably not having in-house virtual arrangements where they can monitor staff. So there's that group. Unfortunately, that is tending to grow a little bit as we obviously don't have a handle on this virus. The second group are those that are still trying to establish an approach of how they're going to approach the fall, how they're going to maintain a balance between work, recruiting, and this virus. This group was a larger group initially, and it was the one that was finding footing in May and June, and now this is all of a sudden kind of reversed, and this is growing again because they just don't know how disruptive this virus is going to be. A lot of these folks tend to be ones that organizations that have limited opportunities to do remote work, remote assignments. They have onboarding that's difficult. They haven't been able to adjust to keep new hires safe as well as their existing staff. So they've been really trying to figure out ways to deal with this virus in a safe way and maintain their recruiting footprint. I would expect that most companies will find out what they're going to do, but there's still a number of these companies that are saying, I just don't know what we're going to do. We're going to be out. We need to maintain our talent pipeline. We just are not going to know how we're going to do that yet. And again, there's a lot of companies that haven't been pretty out front about virtual platforms. They don't know what to expect from those, and they're novices, just like a lot of college campuses are facing the same situation. Then we have another group of employers that are going to be recruiting. They're going to be active. It's just not going to be normal. These are the ones that can quickly adjust their positions to remote or work teams that are working remotely. Many of the IT and design companies that I talk to seem to be very open to this. They've done it before. They have a track record. They feel comfortable doing this. So they're going to keep their talent pipeline open that way. Any others that have the resources and the wherewithal have been coming up with new workplace configurations. One of our guest panelists, employer panelists, was just talking about what their organization was doing of how to build these safe workplaces and then begin to develop strategies of how to integrate brand new people from outside into a workforce that they've been monitoring and maybe have been even quarantined and they feel comfortable or safe. And then there's some other employers that just told us, we just simply have no choice. We've got to hire, we've got to stay in there. We're just going to have to continue to do the best we can with that. So that's where companies are falling out in general. There's a lot on this. You can think of a long spectrum on this because there's a lot of places other companies can be, but this is just generally what we're seeing. So what do so without any hard numbers, well, I've got a few hard numbers, at least one. What's going to happen with this college recruiting? I will talk about some different areas, but the only number that I have right now is what's currently going on with regards to our on-campus employment databases, whether it's Handshake or whatever. A couple campuses that I'm very close to have been monitoring their Handshake campuses. They've been monitoring their Handshake employer activity. And both of them are falling within the range of 40 to 50% of the opportunities that they Well, let me back it up, makes a sense. So what they've seen is a drop between 40 and 50% of the postings that were for their students that were online between February and today. It accelerated quite quickly, started to rebound in May and June, and now has fallen off again. So there's some indication we know going into the fall that we can expect that there's going to be a dramatic shift in the number of opportunities for full-time employment. And I will talk about internships in a minute. So what we do in planning for the fall, as far as career centers and things, we're just going to, Bethany said her magic word is unrepresented. I've used this word a long time, but it's going to be disruption. We're going to be constantly disrupted over the next 6 months. Hopefully it will somewhat smooth out, but this virus keeps moving and it backtracks. Immunity is short. I've had 3 friends that contacted the disease in early March, weren't hit too bad. Didn't even go to the doctor, felt pretty good. And then they got smashed again about 2 weeks ago, and they've been isolated. They don't even know how they got it, but it came back, and they've been very, very sick. Fortunately, they're both okay. But so we just don't still know enough about this virus. So my thing is be prepared for a lot of disruptions. Things will go smoothly for a while, and all of a sudden, maybe in your environment, things get, accelerated activity on the virus, and you have to close down. You have to do more than we're already doing. Just so that's got to be you've got to just be willing to accept that disruption. You're going to have to be flexible and adjust on the go. That's for both in colleges and employers. It's going to be virtual everything. I think everybody is aware of this. There is going to be no on-campus recruiting. I think there's people that are optimistic that they may get back to some face-to-face interactions in the spring. I'm certainly in our part of the world, we're not putting a high stake on that. I think our president and provost will pretty much keep the campus locked down as best they can from outsiders. But that means that we've got to do some things pretty quickly with regards to students. As most of you know, students don't like virtual recruiting, or at least that's what they report. And a lot of recruiting staff aren't familiar with virtual formats, particularly with smaller companies, mid-sized companies. So we're going to have to do a lot of coaching of students on the college side and HR folks on the organization side of how to use and interact on in virtual formats. And it's not just going to be for the next 6 months. So I've through my contacts at our office, we're trying to figure out coming up with some coaching and early modeling for students of how to interact and be successful on these virtual platforms. The other big discussion that I've had with employers is what platforms are they going to be on? And are they going to just adapt to the ones that the colleges like Michigan State will use for its career fairs, or the Big Ten will use for its Big Ten career fair or whatever. And we're getting at least those that can have a lot of more experience with virtual platforms, have begun to use them early. So they were early adopters. They're going to go, they're telling us they're switching and adopting in-house platforms. They're going to handle their own career fairs. They're going to handle their own events. They're going to just invite students that are interested in that company through their branding efforts to come to their platforms. And they're not going to participate in multi-campus events or career fairs on other platforms. They're going to handle it all themselves. A lot of it has to do with trusting the platforms. They don't have a high degree of trust of some of the existing third-party recruiting career fair platforms. Some actually, the critique by several people is that some of those platforms are about 10 years old in this, and they hadn't adapted quickly enough to deal with the situation that's currently evolving. So you're going to see employers do that. Employers are also split on whether they're going to attend multi-campus events. Employer will, what that means is there's a group of employers that pretty said, we're going to go to one campus at a time. We don't want to share our event with multiple campuses. We'll just do one campus, while others are very open to handling multiple campuses at the same time. The news on internships is still very, very murky, but I think what my evidence says that we're going to take a hit on internships. It's not going to be universal, but internships look like they're going to take a hit because employers just don't know how to, are having difficulty trying to deal with that. In lieu of that, you're seeing a lot of effort put into coming up with alternative arrangements that will be acceptable to employers, and employers are beginning to adjust their expectations on what kind of experiences they're willing to accept, knowing the situation that students are in. So you're seeing more promos by groups like Parker Dewey. Parker Dewey is the big mini internship experience folks, and they're pushing out these mini internships. And some companies we have found that something that they can manage rather than a 3 or 4 month. They can actually manage a couple week internship, which really gets into project-based learning and project-based assignments. May become a newer norm. In my world of research, this is fine for learning how to do tasks, and maybe that's all we need to worry about. But you know, from this kind of people that employers seek, the broader people skills, the more what I call the broad skills on the T versus doing just a task, those are going to be hard to develop without a longer term engagement and assignments that go beyond, and work contexts that go beyond just learning assignment. I think, and then finally, I think there's going to be full-time opportunities. There's certainly not going to be many. I can't predict. I've been asked over and over again, particularly by the news media, is this as bad as 2008, 2000, 1994? Each of those situations were different. This one situation, because it wasn't initially economic driven, it was another cause. We had optimism that we would get opportunities back up, but there's a lot of confusion about what is going to be going on as far as full-time opportunities. You're going to see full-time opportunities, don't get me wrong. I'm not sure, and you're going to see conflictions in some sectors. I'm going to pick on hospitals because you got an employer panel from a hospital, but our hospital just had a local hiring fair, and it's going on today, and they've had a couple hundred people come. Yet my daughter lives in another part of the state. She's an MP in cardiology, and they're actually laying off people because they still haven't got elective heart care and heart surgery and those things back up because of the virus. So you're seeing this tension between different subsectors within the same industry sector playing off differently. You're going to see confusion in education because a lot of teachers that can retire are just not willing to go back into the classroom under the current conditions as they are arranged. And so I wish I could clarify that, but I still see a lot of confusion about where you're going to hire. Now, if you're talking to your large employers, you're talking to a public accounting firm, you're talking to a big IT company, you're talking to defense contractors, those people are going to hire and they're going to bring them on. But you get into some of the other ones that are softer, even an enterprise that has been a big supporter of mine for years. You know, I haven't talked to them directly, but I imagine they've got some concerns about what's going to happen in hiring and interns this year, just because of what's happening in the travel segment of the economy. Finally, another big thing that's going to be addressed on campus, and it's going to really take up a lot of time on our campus, and how all operations support the diversity and inclusion of students, of all kinds of students. But really, this issue is just because of what's going on in our general department, is just, again, really on the radar screen of nearly everybody. We're going to have to figure out, are we serving our underrepresented students, students of color, in the best way possible? Are they, there's going to be a lot of attention on that. Let me wrap this up then. There's going to be some permanent things coming up, I think, out of this. It's going to change college recruiting significantly. I think in college recruiting, we're going to see an accelerated shift to virtual recruiting. It's been underway for a number of years. It's got a lot of early adapters, a lot of the virtual platforms and the software that is more integrated than ever. I just talked to the folks in California yesterday, and they think that they're going to see much more virtual use. They're getting a lot of pressure to reduce recruiting dollars that upper management thinks are wasted in college recruiting. They're hit by excessive costs attending career fairs and things like that. And they figure that they can handle their recruiting from a virtual integrated platform. And we're beginning to see the platforms begin to integrate from new college hiring, experienced hiring, training and development. There's going to be some announcements, I was assuming this summer, but this virus has probably changed those plans, but we're going to see that. I think on the HR side, I said since January, I've been talking on the HR side a lot, and they're undergoing huge changes, and I'll be interested to see what our panelists say, but HR is changing the way the recruiting is changing, and that's going to spill over into the college. I think on the college side, we're going to see a huge shrinkage in the landscape of higher ed. There's estimated that 20,000 institutions will be gone by will not make it through 2020. Well, that's probably 2022, it should say, instead of 2020. I just saw today that 5 schools closed campuses, a couple in Utah, and I'm trying to remember where the other campuses were, but they're closing, and we're going to see a shrinkage in the kind of, and it's not just the small private liberal arts schools. Anybody's following the University of Akron's having some terrible problems. We're starting to see mid-sized regional publics in parts of the country have problems. The other thing that's coming out through the planning is we're going to see a great consolidation in academic majors. A lot of it's going to be a loss of the liberal arts. But if you looked at what happened this week at Akron, Carthage, though I knew what Carthage was going to do, there's just a lot of consolidation of academic majors, trimming the budget. They're letting go tenured faculty, and those people don't have any job opportunities. So we're going to see that, and those things are going to become permanent. So going into the fall and surviving into 2021, which everybody is hoping to make it through to January, we've got the virus, we've got a struggling economy, the recovery is taking some odd shapes. Most of you have heard the discussion. The president would like a V-shaped recovery. He is not going to get that. Others have talked about different shapes. The most common one talked about now, one may not be familiar with, is the K-shaped recovery. And what that's saying is that a certain group of people, those with college education that can work remotely, that have work assignments that don't take them into unsafe workplaces, are going to improve quickly and do well. And the jobs, those frontline jobs, a lot of jobs that require you to be brought in contact with a lot of people, are going to be eliminated through technology, or are going to be very slow in rehiring. The best we can offer now is a swoosh recovery where we get some jumps in recovery, as we saw when we opened up the economy and we start hiring back, particularly in construction and food and lodging. But we've lost some of that. The real question is what consumers are going to do. They have a big say, and they're being very, very careful. They're not spending a lot of money. They don't know. We've got consumers that are going to be in real trouble when the protections for rent and mortgage payments run out, and they have to begin paying again, and they don't have money. And I just warn you, this recession is going to it's going to go into a recession, and it's going to take a long time to work out of it. I won't spend a lot of time on college and university vulnerabilities, but right now the big one is student enrollment patterns for the fall. And I wouldn't get away without saying that we're going to be in the most contentious, vulgar, and dirty election you've ever experienced, and it's going to affect how we do lots and lots of things. So with that, Bethany, I will turn it over to your panel to get me out of all kinds of trouble.
Thank you so much, Phil. I know that you are the ultimate expert on all things collegiate employment and data, and you could probably talk for hours on this. So I am going to turn it over to Shanna now to run our panel. And Phil, there may be some questions from you, but we'll mostly be talking to Mark and Akilah, who are so happy to have with us here today. So Shanna, I'm going to turn my video back off and remute myself. The stage is yours, my friend.
Thank you so much. So if you don't know me, I'm Shanna Janescu. I'm one of the career coaches at A&M Commerce and Career Development. So we'll get started with our employer panel here. So Mark and Akilah, I'll just have you introduce yourself and the organizations that you work for really quick. Unmute.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. I am Akilah Griffin. I am overseeing currently all of the health system's talent acquisition sourcing initiatives. So really working with community partnerships, collegiate partnerships, and just building our talent pipeline. That was effective as of June of this year. Before that, I've been at Parkland for 4 years. Before that, I oversaw the executive recruitment team. So have done the recruitment, definitely no stranger. I've partnered with University of Texas at Commerce for a long time. Love partnering with you guys, and happy to be here and provide any insight I can give the participants.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Pulliam. I work for Fidelity Investments. I work out of the Westlake, Texas office. I work on the university talent team, which is a part of talent acquisition and human resources. Have been with Fidelity for now 5 years. And prior to coming to Fidelity, I worked at the University of North Texas in the Career Center. So this information, this knowledge, and these best practices are very near and dear to me in helping students to realize the opportunities from earning their degree, and happy to be with you guys today.
Great, thank you, Mark. So we'll just get into the nitty-gritty questions for y'all. So what is the biggest change that you've seen as far as recruiting practices go due to COVID-19?
Well, for us here at Parkland, and I was grateful, thank you, Phil, for breaking down those 3 trends. You know, either people have stopped recruitment altogether, still trying to establish an approach, or just recruiting. And where Parkland is, we are still very much actively recruiting, as you could imagine. And so our recruiting is just not like normal, though. We can't hold interviews, for example, in the actual hospital facility, which is where a large part of our staff works, from clinical staff, operational staff, and corporate staff as well. So we're experiencing some times where we also have to establish a new approach because of the different varied disciplines that Parkland has. So ultimately, whatever approach we take in the ability to still recruit and do it in a timely manner, we always have to stay focused on the relationship to that, bringing in the right talent as it relates to patient care clinically or non-clinically. And we have to adapt. So we have not slowed down.
In regards to our entry-level hiring for our college graduates, we've actually seen a rise in hiring. primarily because the entry-level role is called customer relationship advocate. We have over 30 million customers that are calling into us for a variety of reasons, and we need licensed professionals that can take that call. So back in March, when the pandemic really started to grip the nation, we actually extended 2,000 more jobs to be hired through the end of 2020, in addition to the forecast that we already had. Also, where some companies were inclined or even forced to not have their internship program, we hired the most interns that we've ever had at Fidelity, 968. Now, of course, it was very ambitious for us to do that, and we ran into a mountain of problems on how to execute it, but still hired 968 interns for this summer. So we've seen a rise in hiring. Of course, the activity is a lot different. We had already transitioned to the first step of the interview process being a digital interview, which is on a platform called HireView. So we've started to make some moves in a direction that will help us out futuristically. No one could have imagined what has happened, but we did start to make some changes that have actually helped us.
That's great. So we'll start with you on this question, Mark. How has the pandemic kind of impacted your hiring timelines, if at all?
Well, the timelines are more affected when we talk about the future. When we talk about the new academic year coming up, fall 20 and spring 21, the way that so typically in late May, early June, we start to strategize for the next academic year, what campuses we are going to go to, what events that we're going to frequent, and why we're going to be on campus, and what forecast of students that we want to hire from each particular campus. We've already had a mandate from our leadership that there will be no travel for Fidelity employees, so we won't be on campus. And a lot of the schools have started to schedule virtual career events, et cetera. So it's kind of working out in that regard, but it's affected us in a way that now we have to start this process a lot earlier. I was speaking to some campuses about some needs we have for actuarial students, and I'm already asking for resumes. I'm already engaging with students, whereas this process may not have started until late September, early October.
Right.
We just have to do our diligence to now utilize the contacts that we have on campus and make sure that we get there before our competitors, because the market is going to be very restrictive and people are going to accept, and they're not going to waver from the commitments that they make, just not knowing what's going to be available in the future. Yeah.
And what about Parkland on hiring timelines?
Absolutely. So for us, we've had actually a lot more aggressive timelines. And to Mark's point, likewise, we're doing the same. Where planning would have been, in latter months, I'm actually starting to send out partnership requests right now to understand, what are the plans for the planned virtual events? How can we host other things beyond just career fairs? So we are leveraging the use of, kind of the getting to know you opportunities for students virtually within the space of whether they're going into allied health, for example. Maybe they haven't obtained their certification, but we still feel like we're going to have a significant amount of nurse resident opportunities, for example. We have job postings out there right now for that. So whatever way we can reach those students, if the career services centers and partners who are really going to be our bread and butter and they're going to be the glue during this difficult time to help us advance those timelines. So our timelines have been more aggressive. There's a lot of work being done around making sure our own internal processes can actually support the execution, because that is where the rubber meets the road. We can slate in virtual events, from now until end of the year, but if we don't have an internal execution plan and map to quickly get the students through or graduates through, that can pose another challenge. So we're segmenting different initiatives to make sure that we focus on every possible part of what the virtual world will look like. So we definitely have a more aggressive timeline in our hiring needs.
Great, thank you. And so one of the really interesting things I think Dr. Gardner said in his PowerPoint was that we're seeing some companies or some organizations do both hiring and layoffs at the same time. Are there certain areas of your particular industries that you're recruiting more in or maybe less focused on right now?
For us, we're really focused on our tactical units, and that includes, of course, the clinicians, the registered nurses, the techs, the allied health patient care assistants, or CNAs that are helping the physicians out on the COVID units. Parkland currently houses 4 COVID units, totally separate from the standard patient care, and so that's where that attention is. In other areas, we're allowing people to help out, in screening capacities. We're rapidly hiring guest services specialists, for example, and those are simply people that can stand at the entry of the door and screen people for those, those pre-qualifying questions to kind of give way to, do you have any symptoms? So it's a really all hands on deck approach. Some areas we have cut the hours, but we've reintroduced them. I think this was probably more in the earlier stage when they thought the curve was flattening, and now it's back up. So because there's so much volatility, our focus is to make sure we just have the staff on hand. And then likewise with us, we have not had to experience a lot of the furlough situation. So that definitely has been a blessing to be able to redirect that talent to help out in other areas where we need it.
We've kind of seen a steadying of the workforce. There are areas where we won't extend new requisitions at the rate that we were in the past. Again, but the customer facing roles will continue to increase, just because when you talk about financial services and you talk about the needs of the customer, they have to be secure in knowing that they have someone they can speak to. The wait time is not too long, and those are just some of the areas that we will continue to hire to make sure that we have the staff to meet the needs of our customer base.
Great. And one last question just for our students on the call. So in talking about virtual recruitment, is there something that you've seen a candidate do during this time that has gone really well? And have you seen a candidate make a particular mistake that you would kind of tell our students to be mindful of as they go through this process?
Did you want to take that first, Mark, or I can?
Sure. Well, the thing about interviewing, the thing about looking for opportunities is to, first of all, understand your brand and understand that that's the most important thing of your professional career. Not necessarily how you view yourself, but how you're viewed by others. And that every opportunity is an opportunity to showcase yourself, your talent, your character, your skills, and don't take any of that lightly. Again, for some of our jobs, the first opportunity is a digital interview. And, it's kind of like these Zoom meetings. Sometimes I'll do a virtual event with the university and they'll only have three or four students. And that's not an opportunity for me to do any less of a job in explaining who or why Fidelity. Whether it's 3 students or it's 3,000, that's an opportunity for me to maintain my brand, maintain the brand of the company. It's the same thing with interviewing. You have to bring your A game every single time. You have to prepare, you have to be knowledgeable, you have to be ready to showcase your skill, talk about experiences and opportunities where you can go into more depth and detail about the question being asked. And you just have to, it's just what we call being a professional, being a pro, bringing your A game every single time.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Absolutely. And some things that I would recommend, or I guess I would say that I've seen, is that students aren't prepared. They're the opposite of what Mark was describing as a need. So one of the key things is just that. Don't lax on preparing as if you were going to be in front of that individual employer for that particular opportunity. And that goes without saying, you know, to be professional. Now it doesn't just include yourself and your resume, that the two things that we can see virtually, but the environment from which you're going to be operating virtually too. Be mindful of if you're going to have distractions and inevitable, you know, when you're in a virtual environment, we have to have some flexibility and grace with that. But in order to bring that A game, like Mark was describing, you have to make sure that that is aesthetically correct too, because that also plays a part into your first impression. So there's just a couple of things from the virtual events that we've had that I've seen some students do very well, and that's be extremely prepared, whether that's pre-preparing questions, ensuring that you're putting your best self out there on your resume so it is consistent with what people see virtually of you, and then also making sure the backgrounds and the noise and things like that are presented in a professional manner.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to call Bethany back up, and then we'll take some questions from our virtual audience here. Thank you all so much. That was fantastic. So many words of wisdom so quickly.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions come in the chat, but before we do that, I actually want to ask a question that I thought of. Shanna, I hope this wasn't on my list. I'm kind of going rogue here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Flexibility.
Flexibility. Reframe, right? That's also my favorite word. Reframe my perspective. My question is there any silver lining that has come out of this transition to a virtual world? You know, I've found some in my own personal life, and I'm curious from your recruiting perspective if there are any silver linings, any things that you've seen that have been really great that have come from this.
Absolutely, and you see me shaking my head vigorously. So Parkland has over 12,000. I'd venture to say maybe close to over 13,000 at this point, employees. And among those, our hardest challenge within recruitment, just because of the nature of healthcare, right, is really coordinating interviews. And one of the silver linings for us is that we are able to do so in a much faster way and capacity, thanks to Zoom and WebEx and things like that. And if the faster we're able to coordinate things like panel interviews that sometimes take a little bit longer, we have cut that in half, by more than half. And what that does is it contributes to our funnel because we're able to hire a lot faster. And decisions can be made, virtually, collaboratively in a matter of 15 minutes versus waiting for people to come together, sit down at the table, talk about it. We can do it right there. So that has been a very much well-received silver lining for us here in recruitment.
That's amazing. I love some efficiency. So that's great. What about you, Mark?
Well, the necessity is the mother of invention, and the stress of these times has made us make changes for the better, and things that we'll be able to do, like she said, more efficiently in the future. And whatever the new normal is, whether it stays this way or whether we do regress back into some of our old patterns, this will make us better, not only from the recruiting standpoint, it's going to make students be able to use the skills that they are most adept at, which is technology. And it's really going to showcase the talent of a lot of people, because there'll be new innovations and inventions that people come up with that make all of this seem normal, even if right now it doesn't seem normal. So that's the silver lining, is that in the future, we'll see some changes that may have not come for 20 or 25 years, but have been expedited by this process.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of companies that probably had an adamant no way, no how remote work policy. And now I think there's definitely been some changes to that. I kind of think that the typical 8 to 5 work day may start to shift as well because of, different competing priorities with school changing and that kind of thing. So I'll be really intrigued to see whether that comes to fruition. So from our chat, this question came up during when you were speaking, Phil, but anyone can answer any of these questions. So the question was, is the sorry, I want to read the question correctly, and it's on my other screen. Um, uh, have any changes with our current atmosphere with the Black Lives Matter movement and a focus on diversity and inclusion initiatives and changing international immigration policies? How has that in our society right now, has it had any impact on the recruiting process in your view?
For our, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You're much
Sorry,
better.
you did say Phil, but I heard anybody can answer, but I'm interested in hearing from you, Phil, so you go right ahead.
I think the big question we have, and it will come up in trends this year, is how organizations have adjusted their recruiting process to handle these diversity issues. One of the big ones, because it's a colleague, a former graduate, has been working on how we message in recruiting process, our positions and the company brand and things. And he's found that the messaging to certain, underrepresented groups, and particularly students of color, have not been very impactful about the organization. And so he's coaching organizations how to change that messaging to respond better. So I think you're going to see creative organizations become more astute about how they message to they're going to look at more different groups, and then one size fits all. I think you're going to see a lot more and better use of technologies and eventually face-to-face relationships with affinity groups and better utilize them than just trying to capture whoever comes to a career fair or whoever logs on to our interest night. So I think I'm not going to say all companies are doing. I think the companies that are actually concerned about this, that have made a statement about this, are going to do something. I'm surprised that how many companies really don't have a diversity plan in place at all, and just don't really worry about it. It'd be surprised you how many do, but I think that those that have made a statement during this past 4 or 5 months are going to begin to really evaluate how they're recruiting. And then now I can turn it over to you folks, because I think you're probably doing that right now.
Mm-hmm. I know. Thank you, Phil. But that's exactly right. That's the approach that our leadership is taking. I know shortly after we saw the onset of protests, things like that, Dr. Cerise, our Parkland's chief executive officer, did himself make a statement that was also followed by and supported by our chief talent officer. And so they're very much, aligned with making sure that we do not take our eye off of the ball. In everything we do, we are just making sure that we stay focused on collaborating, to your point, more than beyond the job fairs, but really getting in the community. And that's a large part of my transition into this role, is to make sure that we expand what people already know about the Parkland brand, but put it into the associations that that are specific to African Americans and other minority groups and things like that. So that's how we're approaching incorporating that into our recruitment, definitely.
Great. And if Phil, you might answer this question. What is the outlook for opportunities for OPT for students during and after the pandemic for our international students?
So I just think that right now, given the political environment around anything out, international, that it's going to be pretty murky, and it's not going to be help. I just don't see anything out there that signals, oh, we're going to be open. I think there's companies that really want to work with international students. I think they have opportunities. I just don't think that the climate in this company is assisting international students at all. And we've seen that just by the recent effort to, if you're going to be online, then those international students can't come attend and things like that. I think I just don't think the environment is helpful right now. It's never been a great environment, even when we had a different administration. But right now, it's pretty nice. Now, there is still an international economy out there, and there are a number of employers in the U.S. that have operations in India and China and Europe, and they need those people to go back, to train them and go back home. I think most of that training, if they work with international students, international students want to stay here, I think the companies will say, we want to hire, but you're going to have to go home and we'll train you in your home country. We just can't get you an opportunity to stay here.
Yeah, it's a challenging environment for absolute certainty.
Yeah.
So another question that has just come through, and it was specific to the engineering field, so I'm not sure 100% how clear our answer will be on this, but it's just, the question was just how the pandemic has changed recruiting in the engineering field. And we've touched on this, but is there anything else you would like to add that our students would want to know about changes to recruiting? That, I mean, just any like last tidbits. We've got just a few minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like them to know that they may not already know about changes to recruiting as we know it?
Your competencies are going to be very important in how you can display those skills. So whether it's portfolio, whether there's platforms and applications now where a recruiter can actually watch you work out a scenario that may be like computer science or engineering, you're really going to have to be prepared to present your skills in ways that may not be face-to-face. So becoming familiar with these different platforms that they could test you or quiz you, or having portfolios that point to different projects and different work that you've done in the past or currently is going to be increasingly more important. And again, you're just going to have to stay in a preparation and prepared mode to be able to display your skills, because again, it's a competition. You're competing against the others that have applied. You're competing against people who have been referred. And, just to say a little bit about that, about 80% of the hires that we make across the enterprise are from referrals. So not only are your technical skills important, but also your networking skills, also your social skills, also the people that you surround yourself with, your mentors, etc. Because a lot of times we'll go specifically to a professor like Dr. Gardner and ask about the top talent, or that Professor Gardner may have a relationship with someone like us and say, hey, I've got a student that's really talented. That's a referral. That's very important to us. And because of the relationship, those individuals get to interview and get into the process. Doesn't mean that they're going to get the job, but if you get into the process, you got a chance, right? So for any given job, there may be 500 to 5,000 applicants.
I think you're really on to something there. I think about the referrals from the Career Center. Yesterday, I got an email from a student, and I heard with a resume, great student, ready, statistics major, and I just thought, oh, maybe I need to email his resume to Mark if Mark needs some. So, so it's all about like who you know and building those relationships. That's so key.
You ask about engineering, and I think engineerings are going to be in demand. I think the thing this is going to be a period of adjustment in engineering, because engineering is highly dependent on those students having real work experience. And they're really in a pipeline like no other, and most organizations, they just have, they nurture that pipeline. And fortunately that they start introducing students earlier. So they've had companies, but they're going to have a number of students that aren't going to have the traditional internship or co-op experience prior to graduating. They're just going to, it's going to be probably temporary here but we know that's going to happen. So how are the students going to adjust? As Mark said, how are you going to talk about what your skills and abilities are if you can't necessarily lean on that particular work experience? What else have you done that you can demonstrate? And on the employer side, I've talked to a few employers that are hiring engineers that are are being very open to the and receptive to the fact that there's going to have to be some alternatives here, because gee, you had a great internship lined up and it fell through. We're going to recognize that you were qualified for that internship. And then if you can talk about doing a project or something, it's going to alleviate some of the pressure to demonstrate some of those. But that's what's going on in engineering right now, is how we're going to deal with an environment that's heavily dependent on pre-professional work experience as legitimate baseline for employment, when that really just can't happen the way it's normally. And there's just not enough experiences that are going to be able to be handled remotely to cover the number of students.
Yeah, I think of a construction engineer, that's a challenging internship to complete remotely. So definitely a challenge to foresee, and we'll keep an eye on the employers making those shifts for sure. So we have, well, we did have 1 minute left, then it just turned to 1 o'clock as I was about to say that. So that is pretty much all we have. Students, if you have any questions that you maybe were a little shy to ask today, please email those to hirealion@tamuc.edu. We will definitely follow up with you. We have a couple questions that came in from some career counterparts at other institutions that we'll follow up on with you, Phil, and Akilah and Mark. We just want to thank you guys so much for attending, taking the time out of your day to teach our students, and thank you for all that you do for hiring our alliance. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much as well. Thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.